you're clinging to the light of day, to tell you everything's a-okay. And medication don't do much. Yeah, it just numbs the brain. Guess you might say I'm a little intense. I'm on the bright side of being hell-bent. So, take it from me, you're not the only one who can't see straight. If you were ever in doubt, don't sell yourself short. You might be bulletproof. Hard to move mountains when you're paralyzed, but you gotta try. And I'm calling out, get up, get up, get up, move on. Get up, what's taking so long? Get up, get up, move on. Stop stalling, I'm calling out. Get up, get up, move on. Get up, ain't nothing wrong. 'Cause I believe you can be whatever. And I agree you can do much better. Trust me. Trust me. Everybody wants to sing their song. So Marvin Gaye, what's going on? Ain't nothing normal when it comes to you and me. I'd rather twist myself in knots and watch you give up on your dreams. If you were ever in doubt, don't sell yourself short. You might be bulletproof. Hard to move mountains when you're paralyzed, but you gotta try. So I'm calling out, get up, move on. Get up, what's taking so long? Get up, move on. Stop stalling, I'm calling out. Get up, move on. Get up, ain't nothing wrong. 'Cause I believe you can be whatever. And I agree you can do much better. Trust me.
Yeah, I don't know why I never talk about it. I guess that's probably part of the problem. Yeah, sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you're right. I'm just gonna keep moving. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep moving. Today, tomorrow, and the next.
Get up, move on. Get up, what's taking so long? Get up, move on. Stop stalling, I'm calling out. Get up, move on. Get up, ain't nothing wrong. 'Cause I believe you can be whatever. And I agree you can do much better. Trust me.
Oh, for muse of truth, that we could descend into the darkest hells of our own inventions. A kingdom, a stage, a cave.
You can never sound or
Okay, let's go live here. And it looks like I've got pretty good audio levels. got pretty much everything arranged relatively well. Um, yeah, and thankfully my CPU usage is dipping a little bit, but it's still 2/3 to 3/4. I mean, it goes from 66% up to 75. And I've seen so bandwidth out is just about, it's hovering around 4 megabit per second right now, which this connection can sustain pretty well. This connection here goes up to about 6 megabit per second in practice, and it's not really, the feed out is not saturating, and there is a little bit of that is that's ultimately the video cameras, the security cameras for my mom going out to my house that I could go through and tap down if it had to be. But welcome to everybody. I see some very familiar names in the chat, and I thank everybody for attending, especially kind of short notice. I didn't really get this set up very well. I've just been not really necessarily depressed, but just kind of down the doldrums on some aspects. I'm just not, and there's a lot of good news in a lot of ways. And number one is, well, not in my necessarily in my personal life, but New Mexico is starting to get some of the rain. We are seeing, and it's early for our true monsoon season. Really, that it's more in its prime, or should be more in its prime, about a month from now. But it's the lead up, the kind of the teasers, and it's after a very dry spring here in New Mexico. We're in a multi-year drought, just like you see the pictures for Lake Mead, and we haven't had the snowfall, we haven't had the rain. Even if it were to fill up, to that it go to the level that we need, it would, the floods would just be, they'd be a horrible thing if we're to go through it in just a simple, even a few years. And so that's relatively good news. It's getting out there, it's getting wet. New Mexico right now has the 2 largest wildfires on recorded history, including the second largest in history is in this corner of the state. Thankfully, it's blowing away from us. It's going away from us. I mean, not very good for the people that are in its path or anything like that. And it's about 50% contained at this point. It started about a month ago. I haven't seen the source of it, but a lot of time before lightning season, the fires are caused by people. Start along roadways, people throwing out cigarette butts, even catalytic converters and stuff like that, touching dry grass and things like that, will start those fires. And that's a little bit beyond the point. The goal is just to get them out, get them get them to where they're not burning and reducing that. But that's the good. Uh, that's the big part of the fires is it's a drought. It's not the largest wildfire now that's burning still, and that went through and displaced people from homes and things like that. I don't know if, how many residences burned, but the that was started by the Forest Service doing a controlled burn, trying to reduce the fire threat, and it got out of control. And actually, two fires that merged. So that's that's part of the news. At least we're getting the rain now, even though we've got that aspect of fires. It's a little bit overcast. It's really not all that bright out. I didn't actually. I left the house. I didn't turn on the air conditioning for my equipment room at home. I don't have the swamp cooler on here yet because it's cool enough. I've got a fan blowing down. Um, and so it's doing pretty well in that regard. And so in other news, it's a little bit of a waiting game, and I'm talking about my employment aspect. I'm doing pretty good. I'm very well positioned. I'm having to wait for some meetings to be arranged to get further in the process, but it does look good. It just taking a little bit of time. And of course, I have enough things to do. I have too many things to do in this interim before I would likely get very busy. And I haven't been utilizing that time effectively. That's a little bit of what is impacting me. I'm feeling that I'm not being productive enough. There are video topics to the channel, and there's content that I can do, and I go through, and it's funny because I'll it's almost like it's not quite the 2 a.m. kind of thing, but it's like late at night or some occasion where I think all of a sudden I think, hey, that's a good set of topics, and I'll go through and I'll even write out. I've learned to go through and write down and get it to an email to me. Pull out the Chromebook, quickly compose up an email and send it out, and that way I can go through and review later on what I was thinking. It's kind of like the Seinfeld episode. I don't know how many people remember that he thinks of the joke of the skit that he's going to do, and he jots it down on a note, and I think he puts it in like the laundry or something else. He puts it in this jacket, and he's trying to remember it later on, and I think ultimately he looks and sees his handwriting, and he's not able to figure out what he wrote down or what the big joke is. And I think, yeah, thank you, John. I think it's good news in the regards of, as I say, the hiring situation looks very good for me. I'm not going to go through and jinx anything to say, I'm a shoo-in or anything else like that. I've got to go through a little bit more of a process, and there's a lot bigger dynamic going on that I really necessarily can't let on in even though it's been made public. I'm not going to think of that as a reason. Well, or it's not. something that people should construe as a barrier. It's just um, to me getting hired. It's more of there's other factors that are in the mix that are taking the time away from the people that would be meeting with me and going on a little bit further. And as well as it tightens up a little bit of the hiring process for where I'm trying to get in, because it's causing them to need to evaluate their employees and everything else that are coming in, um, so that they don't get caught in a liability situation or have issues with personal to hire. And it's just a normal thing. It's a normal hiring process. It takes a little bit of time to do meetings. It's not just a really quick thing, but at least I'm getting answers. I'm getting a lot more timely response than a lot of places out there that I applied and just didn't get not any notifications back at all. People didn't even inform me, hey, you're not the candidate we picked. I've gone through, and LinkedIn keeps sending me all these remote job notifications now. I've set up the thing. I've gone through and applied for so many of those, and it's come to nothing. And now I'm getting those, I'm still getting them, and it's just like I'm not even applying anymore, because I figure there's not going to be any change there. And so I'm still just having some other factors that, the normal experience, but uh, as I've mentioned previously, I mean, we do need to check up on each other from time to time. I'm glad to say that I don't experience um, depression. I don't have it as an impact in my life. I've learned coping skills, but however, I realize that there are people that have to transition that, even at it's at a chemical level for them, and it's other factors that have happened to them that creates those conditions for them. And I have all the sympathy in the world for someone experiencing that, because it's a horrible thing. And I can understand that, them going through that experience without necessarily the same factors going on with me, or that I think I'm relatively in tune with um, where I'm at mentally, and can go through. But it's been a hard process. I would never imagine, for my work ethic and everything else, and how I just like going in and being busy and doing the job. Sometimes at the very exclusion to my life, um, it's a big factor for me not to necessarily think that I'm employed well enough. And the irony is, I'm at an age where I should be allowed to go through and do hobbies, what I ultimately regard as hobbies, that is enough of a job as it is, to go through and I wish I had the money in my life that I could go through and didn't have to do some of the things of going through and just being able to pay someone to do some of the task that I have otherwise, house repair and all sorts of factors, and especially trying to do house repair on a budget is it's not really possible. And so, yeah, it's addressing what's being said in chat. I mean, recognizing that depression or the experience that people go through with that is, um, much of the time it's a full chemical imbalance that creates that condition for people, and that's in a lot of cases that is a lifelong illness that people experience just because of the that chemical aspect, and I have all the sympathy in the world for people that experience that, and I want to be of help for people that have that in their lives and be uh, an effect or influence to be able to do what I can to reduce that condition for them. Um, and I'm just going through and I'm kind of following along. As I say, for the even the video topic is, I'm putting out there, what do you want to do? Really, there's enough video topics that I've gotten from me. It's, in fact, it's a little bit much at times. Various things I need to get back in and address. And I've been keeping up. Scanning, I'm always falling behind. I need to get through and uh, start doing a little bit more scanning. It's Tech Tangents even released a video that there's a scanner from I'm trying to think of the company. It's I don't know if the company name is like an acronym or something else. Great video. And Curious Mark, he went through and did a review almost a year ago of the same scanner from the company, and I just have my copy machine, and I use my copy machine, or in the past I've used it more for scanning than I have even for printing aspects. But I'm just so behind in my scanning, and scanning takes time. It takes I mean, there's where I have to sit there for hours and just go through and do the pages. Now, some of those scanners that are coming out now, I mean, they're amazing. They're book scanners, and you lay it out, and it actually um, it the software reduces the curvature and everything else. It turns out, you end up with a final product that's flat. You can do OCR stuff on it and make it searchable and things like that. And I just go through and I scan that stuff, and I don't know what process he has to him, but he goes through and he makes the scans that I can provide to him, and other scans that are being provided to him by other people. He goes through and makes it OCR readable and things like that. And that's when I say OCR, optical character recognition. In other words, it's just not an image of stuff. It is where it's words, characters that you can go through and you can search for particular phrasing or text or whatever within that document. And that's very handy for a big, long IBM document to go through and find the section that you need. And I'm just going through and looking. I'm kind of trying to catch up a little bit with my Facebook. And there is another museum presentation after the end of an hour from the start of my live stream that I may want to go through and watch. I got a little bit of a late start today, and in starting up my computer, I normally have to the recording system. I have to wait for the mechanical drive on it to calm down. And it's done that very well, but the CPU usage, I don't know why OBS has got that. It's still relatively constant. It's still about 60%. And I think that's just OBS being OBS. And you get, it's free software. I mean, you get what you pay for. So yeah, I do have enough topics ahead of me. I've tried to go through, and one of the in fact, I need to see how the thread's developing. It's on Vintage Computer Federation, and someone had an 8550-021, meaning the original MUL 50, and that has a yeah, there's no new topics to that. But that's the MUL 50 with the 20 megabyte MFM drive. In fact, let's do this. Get up to my, okay. So the that is ultimately this controller in the MUL 50, the MFM, and this is actually even the newer controller. The poster of that topic on the Vintage Computer Federation forum has the older MFM controller, and I know that because there's the silver cap chip that's on the board as pictured from above, and those original controllers and everything. I mean, that's there's just lots of trouble, of course, with those things being 35 years old, and but they were having drive failures, and they ultimately, a pretty good programming level on their part, they went through, and this, I guess, has 4 heads, so 0 through 3, and they went through and wrote a program in the adapts the CMOS settings that excludes head number 3, because that was where most of the errors were observed. And thankfully the head was it was at the end of the numbering. In other words, you're able to just reduce by 1 in that instance, and only that instance, when it's the last head, the last, head and platter that are used on the drive, and got it to where there are less effective errors for heads 0 through 2. Of course, the drive operates at a reduced capacity, but the drive is dying ultimately. And they're looking at replacing what are the other hard drives and controllers I can put into the system. And it's funny because someone went through and offered an ESDI controller from a MUL 60 and MUL 80. And I made the comment, well, the only ESDI drives I know about that work with that controller are 5.25-inch full height drives. And so you're not going to be able to really cram that in a MUL 50 case. I was trying to get a little bit where I'm trying to go through. Let's put this all the way over there. I'm trying to go through with the equivalent board that went into the MUL 60 and MUL 80 that is conventional MFM, because that is the equivalent of this controller. for the Model 50. I mean, you can see the same, that the chips mimicked just even one for one. And this connector, being ultimately abbreviated version of these two, because this is for your second drive. That's your data of your second drive. This is the control cable. This is the data cable for the primary drive. And MFM design on the Model 50 went through, and it's just a single drive, of course. So this is ultimately a, being reduced somehow to this connector. And I've started mapping out. I thought that there might be a pinout of this somewhere. I used to have the PC source book. That was a really big book. It had a lot of, had interrupt calls. It had just a whole bunch of data for the PCs. And it had some pinouts that, that were common on IBM systems, but I don't know if it had the MFM drive for the Model 50. But my thought is just an adaptive harness that goes through and breaks it back out into, and who knows, for the purposes of the Model 50, you're dealing with the BIOS, of course, as well, and the could this even be made to handle two drives? Could this be where there's connections for that second drive? Because this control cable has a twist in it, and if you effectively put a twist in this for the control cable, is there enough? I don't know, the data connection for that second drive. I don't know how that would be implemented. You probably wouldn't have the pins needed for that second connection to a drive, but at least this could be adapted to a 3.5-inch drive, because there are MFM drives. There's even 20 megabyte MFM drives that IBM had on like the Model 25 when they ran out of the proprietary drives. And so if you could do the right breakout, you could have a more commercially available MFM drive for this. Now, the other thought with the original Model 50 is, and I need to get the risers up here, the 50Z went through and adapted the hard drive to the DBA ESDI type. And that's a bare riser just with circuit traces. And there was a riser available for that you could backfit the 8550-021 system with the DBA ESDI drive, and it had a couple ROM extensions. Very rare adapter. And it's where Jim Shorney did a dump of the BIOS contents for that. I think Peter Wendt in Germany had run into one, or was enough to get a picture of it and things like that, but they're just not out there. Hopefully those BIOS contents aren't verified. I'd like to go through ultimately the ROM extensions. I'd like to go through and ultimately verify them, because they were soldered into the riser, and Dr. Jim went through and desoldered them to be able to read them in an EEPROM reader. And so, and it would have been possible for something like a debug script and things like that to do that as well, and then go through and separate them on the system rather than reading them in the EEPROM reader, since they were ROM extensions. But what you can also do is you can take the 50Z BIOS and you can split it. It's on two ROM chips, the 27512, and you can split it into 4 chips from those 2, which are the 27 C256 ROMs, and you could run it, and it is effectively, it makes your original Model 50 into a form of the 50Z. Well, on the Vintage Computer Federation forum, the original poster said that they didn't want to modify the BIOS of the system. So splitting the BIOS and going through and doing it that way, they didn't want to do that, but they were thinking of, hey, if I'm able to put in a different controller board in there, it's even a full length, and connect up a 5.25-inch full height drive somehow to the system, I'll do that modification, but I won't do the other, a modification of making my original Model 50 into a 50Z or anything like that. You're not getting, it's still, the main thing to the Model 50, the Z comes from the 0 weight states on the memory too. But I'm just going through, that's one of the projects here that I'm trying to go through and reduce this or figure out the connection, the differences between the two of them, since they are equivalent. And of course, the original Model 50 MFM controller is electronically comparable to the Model 60, the controller that was on the Model 60 originally, that had to be retrofitted, it had to have the goo over the chip. And Tom has gone through and he's put up the pictures and things like that. I've got even the multimeter. I've got the pinout of the MFM controller, the conventional one, to go through. Now we're having sirens outside for some reason. Not here, but going by. Okay. And I don't know how audible that is in my noise canceling mic here, but I think that even like these 3 chips, I think that's an addition from the older version to this. These 3 chips, I'm wondering if those are on the hard drive itself. I mean, there may be part of that circuitry that is ultimately on this board to make it a conventional MFM drive that's actually on the hard drive itself. So that's kind of a question there. So there's that. Now, I did have the, and this is even a longer term. This is even determining more pinouts. This is another project that I've just gotten lost on, that I haven't followed up as far. And this is for the, in fact, you can even see on the riser, I'm going through and taking it for an example. And I'm going through and taking my red Sharpie and marking the pin count positions. I can go through and better analyze this with the multimeter, because this is the Model 55SX riser. And it's a mid-level riser. There's an earlier version, there was a later version. This has the chip and resistor and some capacitors and things like that. There's for the speaker connection, and then it has the loop to reset the password. There's even bodge wires that's on the reverse of that, just to adapt it. And I've got another riser around than this too. In fact, here's one without the without the chip, without the resistor, even though it has the solder pad positions, and without the bodge wires. But I had this one selected because it's such a close match, and this has the bodge wires too. Okay. And the resistor and the chip. I mean, there's even the spare spot there, but it's got this FRU on there. And this is actually to make the 55 LS model. Okay. And it goes through, it ultimately has the same FRU masked in solder, but this is the particular riser that goes through and composes with a 55SX planer to make the 55LS model. And the riser alone adapts the planar ID. It changes. When you have this riser in place of this riser, it goes through and it changes the planar ID. It changes the planar ID to what you would need for the 55LS model. And so there's some electrical difference between these two risers. And I've gone through with a multimeter and probed these, and I can't figure out. There's ultimately some loop back or something else that makes those risers electrically different that I have not figured out yet. I still have to probe them out because I want to discover what exactly it is there that does that. So that's been a long-term project. I did get my slices in the other day and did a video course last night on them, and I wanted to get some shells exactly like this to where that has the IO connector and you know, a shell that I could go through and kind of start to experiment with. And it's funny because I do have the shell for this one elsewhere, but this is effectively the circuit board that would go inside this particular shell. And it's serial on the one side and parallel. I need to get pictures of this, get them to Tom. I was investigating the parallel port aspects to this and seeing how easy it'd be to make this into a bidirectional parallel port, in addition to what the configuration is, how it does the configuration of the parallel port. You know, as I commented on video last night, I've gone through and I've you know, I've connected this up to a zip drive with the Palm Zip driver, and but that's a circuit board that goes in. You know, I wanted to get shells and these IO pass-throughs to be able to do some experimentation of the what these work. And these wouldn't be really hard to make PCBs for. You know, in the modern time, you could go through and you could make ultimately a different PCB. You could go through and you could put in a I think it'd be kind of cool. You could put in one of the 16552s or something like that. You could give a UART COM port. You could give a bidirectional parallel port, even the possibility of two serial ports on the adapter with one, I mean, with a chip like this, ultimately. You would go through and you'd have to add some other logic, because part of this on the convertible is that this slice can be also effectively powered down. when it's connected, just to save the battery power of the PC convertible, that the slices can go through and you can power them down when they're not being used. And that's undoubtedly what a little bit of that voltage. I don't know what that if that's an SDR, or I don't know if that's a voltage regulator. But probably ultimately something for the power switching of this adapter. But that's another sort of project that I've been looking at. I've got the slices out for that. I'm trying to go through and figure out some stuff. I'm finally getting into the Model 53. And on this version, I actually didn't even have a DS1397 chip in this one. I got this planer basically as a stripped planer. Anything that was able to be removed from the board was pulled, including a chip here that is ultimately a ROM, and then the DS1387. Now, I have spares of these. As I say, the irony here is I've never seen one of these flat. It runs the CMOS clock, and it has actually 2 KB of non-volatile RAM for the microchannel extended CMOS. And I've never seen one of these flat. And although I've seen the DS1287 that runs the real-time clock, I've seen those go flat for running limited electronics. But this is what the Model 55SX should have been from inception. I mean, it should have had the extended microchannel CMOS, the ability to do all your system RAM on the planer itself. This even has IDE, and it's also capable of running the 2.88 megabyte diskette drives. And the study I'm doing here is that this is the ROM of the system, and I've been able to dump this, and I've supplied this to Tom. But Reply did a flash-based firmware on this. This is actually the flash chip, and it effectively would go through and have some redundancy to the system BIOS in case your flash image was bad, that you still had the ROM. And it was the thought that the ROM is copied over to the flash and things like that. But Major Tom was asking me if this planer runs without having the ROM in there, and it doesn't seem like it does. There are I went through and tried setting jumpers and things like that. I have, of course, the riser in place. Whenever you have an IBM planer, in particular microchannel, that's under test, I've said this on video, you always need to have a riser in place if the system had a riser for the adapter slots. Of course, there are older versions that have risers for the diskette drives and hard drives. But in this case, the riser on the board goes through and does the planar ID. The system has to go through and figure out how many microchannel slots are there, and tries to go through and read if there's any adapters. But that's just further work I'll do. I may have to kind of expand or get into some areas on the test lab. I do have some systems I've pulled off the bench now, of course, like the Model 65SX. There's other planers that I need to go through and test. But that's another project. I'm going through and still doing photos of adapters, and I need to go through and get some more photos. I'm doing EEPROM reads, particular things. I do need to go back and scan. I just dropped off of so I mean this is the broadband adapter, and really not of anything of a functional level now. Now this EEPROM is not socketed, but the one on this, it's the same board. And it has that same effective ROM socketed, going through and reading these EEPROMs, doing what I can to go through and document. I've got to get pictures of these. Probably this one is a little bit more of an example of the picture that we're looking for. You can even see it's got Motorola and got the frequencies and everything else matched up. So there's enough topics to go through that can be on. But it's just it's so diverse of stuff and things like that. Let me go through and catch up with the comments. Even there's a posting on the Facebook group for the main PS2 group. Someone has been wanting me to go over the differences between the PS2 and the conventional sims, and really it's from an angle of the 30-pin sims, but that there are differences, of course, with the 72-pin sims and things like that are a little bit easier to understand on those regards. So yeah, I'm just kind of catching up with all the chat. There's quite a bit of stuff that went through. Yeah, the platters in my image. Yeah, and that's common. Those drives go through and they make a noise that is just not like, I mean, it's very close to other hard drive noises, of course, but just that sound that you can tell right off the bat when you power up the system and you hear that, just the heads, that mechanism scraping over the platters, that you say, I know that drive is gone. And I think I have ultimately 3 drives, and I've got one that's fully bootable, the one here. I've got one that works, but you can't boot from it. You have to have some other diskette means and things, and that's just, it's slowly dying. And then I have a third one that it's just gone, it's shot. And I haven't gone through and opened up anything. I mean, probably I'll do it on the bad one. I can do pictures and show that aspect, and maybe probe at it, pull the PCB off and take pictures. But also on the controllers, I have, one controller that it looks visibly complete, but it gives, an error. If it's paired with a good drive, you don't get anything from it. So, and then I've got I think the 2 controllers that work, if I'm not mistaken, or at least this one controller that works. And I need to get things labeled and inventoried as well. I want to go through and do, and of course I need to start into a lot of drive pictures and things like that too. I think at the Ardent tool, I think Thomas will be willing for any set of images I do to really enhance aspects of the pages. And photographs, unlike scanning, I mean, photographs are relatively quicker for me. there's a separate aspect I have with my photo rig, and I still have to adapt better. And even today, Lewis is kind of complaining at me, send an email, and he's talking about there's a blue tint and things like that to some of the pictures. And you know, I try and do what I can for lighting and things like that. Dave at EEV blog has and Big Clive, you know, interesting for where they're at in the world. But they've done photo rigs and things like that have done pretty well for electronics. You just have to deal with the reflectivity and things like that. That I can do pictures relatively well. And even the pictures I do, one of the aspects is making sure that the adapter is clean enough to take a picture of it and things like that too. Yeah, and I've got a few 3.5-inch MFM drives as well. I think I can go through and ultimately have an adapter from that Model 60, Model 80 MFM type controller. And then see how the BIOS for the Model 50 is, you know, different from the Model 60. And there's even some things in there that Tom talks about analyzing the BIOS. The BIOS of those machines is pretty convoluted in some areas, is what he comments on. So I'll look over videos. Yeah, I know that there's a bunch of videos out there, and I'll look over videos and see. Diskette drive repair is another aspect that I need to get into on my channel and videos. And not that it hasn't been covered elsewhere, but I feel the need to do it myself, and I need to learn it myself and show if there can be common faults, because I'm having diskette drives that are going bad as well. And I can search for that when I get a chance. And yeah, a lot of time, anybody else other than the YouTube channel can't put up links. So you can give a good video description of what is on another channel, but it is easier for me or it requires me a lot of time as a channel owner to put up the links. And we see what little live stream we're doing right now. Okay. And so what Roman is referring to, and it looks like it jumped in to where I've evidently seen part of that video before. And I'm going through and why is my okay? So next Saturday, I'm trying to line up another visit down to Edgar Digital real soon. And that has the possibility of going through and doing capturing the and I'm facing the camera, my webcam, and I've got the webcam off. I went through and I didn't realize I'm sitting here, and I'm probably causing all sorts of problem for Q trying to read my lips. I'm sitting here talking, and I was not even on camera, and I was scrolled up in the chat. Okay. So I'm just going to scroll through, make sure I'm kind of caught up. There's quite a bit of chat that went through. Yeah, and I used to claim that I'd been lucky with hard drives as well. Although I'm getting to a time frame where they're starting to die on me as well through the different areas. So, and so my CPU usage still is above. It's about 60%, kind of up and down. Never really calmed down for the stream or anything like that. I apologize, and I get often a place that I don't realize I've got to look up and see what OBS is actually broadcasting, and whether I dropped my my webcam view or not, and I have the other way. I leave up the webcam image, and then I'm off on the camcorder, and it's obscuring, and it's giving that phase variation of what's going on, that I'm trying to show on the big screen. So I apologize for that, of going through and sitting here talking away, and I'm not even realizing that I'm not on camera. But that's a few things that are the project areas that are ahead of me that I want to address. But it is, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm getting to the point where and it's going to be a difference too on how I'm once I get employed. The one of the things I'm bringing up to benefit my employment too is I'm entering some cybersecurity training, and I was very hesitant on that because I wanted to get employment started first, or right at the same time, because that's one of the constraints to the program, is that I have to be employed in the end to complete the program, to be able to for all the money that goes to the institution, things like that, I have to be employed. And so I brought up with my employment that I'm going to be going through cybersecurity training as well, to enhance myself and hopefully be more employable out there, with an aspect that is very prominent in IT right now, of the cybersecurity, the organizations, the government entities and agencies going through and being able to block unauthorized use of their systems, getting in. And so I'm hoping to enhance myself that way. But that training is on Saturday. They don't do any training during the week or Sunday, the weekdays. They go through and they do the training remote, of course, on Saturday. And if they're doing all the training on a Saturday, it's going to be a lot of time on Saturdays, and it will go through and it may displace or affect the live stream scheduling that that I have set up here. So I just had to see on the impact. And of course, unfortunately I've got to go through and I've got to primarily be focused on employment, the stuff that gets money. You know, my channel got monetized enough, and I was able to use that as income. That would be great that I'd be able to do that. But unfortunately, we live in a world that's not the case. And so I'll have to go through and adapt to that and keep everybody informed as I go through those changes. Yeah, block TikTok, and I get notification, and Snapchat is another one. And of course, I try and be on all the different social media platforms. I really haven't been on TikTok or done any brief little videos or anything like that on there. But I get those notifications on my phone like crazy too. So I understand. Yeah, and thank you, Hugh. I know I have a very loyal viewer in you of watching my live streams and looking at my videos when they come out. I mean, the channel's growing. I thought I was at I seemed to be at, when I was at 1,280 something users. It seems like I had 2 weeks on that, and I was waiting for it to turn over, that steady growth, and it's done pretty well. Now I'm just I don't know the YouTube algorithm. I don't know the thing to it. I just try and churn out videos and hope that I beat the algorithm in some way, that I'm getting new people introduced or brought in or seen videos. Wow, those drives, and the ST, and that being the Seagate, the ST225s were a very common drive, 20 megabyte drive. And I had a few around here, and I could understand for them being Seagate that they'd still be alive and functional this many years more, because I mean, we're 35 years from 1987 at this point. And the mini scribes are known for their issues. There at Computer Reset, there was even some manuals and I think even software that was found in doing the mini scribe repair and troubleshooting and things like that. And it just didn't, there wasn't any microchannel, or it wasn't as, mini scribe wasn't as big on the microchannel side. And I kind of declined the that. But we're trying to find, Louis Olin's gone through and located some stuff for the IBM's implementation, or the Western Digital implementation of MFM on microchannel systems. And there is maybe some more that is going to come out of that as well. But yeah, we hope that those drives keep running. And we wonder, even at some point with those drives, though, do we go through and park the heads and retire them and put in some flash-based, some solid state solution in their place. But then if you have that mechanical drive set, it's going to get stiction, and the heads are going to get, even if it's parked. I mean, I'm thinking that there's still material on the platter that is underneath the heads. When the heads are parked, it's just a non-data area. But there's still you know, probably ultimately tracks or that coating of some form that's on the glass platter that you could get stiction with the heads parked, and certainly that stiction as well. I mean, it's not really good for the heads either. You're ripping material away from the platters and ripping material, uh, the heads, even ripping the heads off the inside the drive. Yeah, and so inventory, I've not done very well on inventory in the past, and it's come up now. I mean, that's probably one of the questions that could be asked of me in like an Ask Me Anything, that I could respond and say, um, what's been the source of your computers? How do you go through and how you inventory them? And we even had that recently with the Mall 60s, that I had a picture of the 5 Mall 60s. I've got 5 planers that I think are working for them. Now I have a 6th planer that is it seems to be non-functional. There's no reaction from it at all. But I didn't remember where I got those systems from, how I'd source them. I knew that I had 1 or 2 of them from the New Mexico Highway Department or Department of Transportation. And then I stumbled upon a SIF news group post that right before I went up to Sacramento to pick up a lot of systems, PS2s and other stuff. And I've got some Model 60s from that individual that was there in Sacramento as well. So I don't have if it's not on the SIF news group on how I picked up a system, how I sourced something, if I didn't jot it down and it's where I've gone through and annotated the posts I did or something, and granted, I can find it nowadays. I can look back and find, okay, this is where I got the system. I don't have a good source. Inventory wise, I'm getting better in that, and I'm getting better in that. At least I've been organized to do enough like with like parts as I go through and sort out. But I need to go through and test parts and label parts and even do an inventory of what works, what doesn't work. Because I have some parts I've got mixed in probably that I've made a comment on that I realized were, in fact, one of the things was an XGA2 adapter. And I had it on like a Model 90 or Model 95. And I was getting a particular non-fatal error from the adapter, because when I swapped in another adapter, the error went away. I could go through and I could replicate by switching parts. Hey, this board has the error, this one doesn't. And of course, the solution for me was put in a different XGA2 adapter. Even though once you got through that non-fatal error, everything was fine. And I need to go through and get that stuff labeled. And from here to where I don't take out a good take out a bad part and try and get it working. I mean, that's the joke, right? With the network cabling. If you find I would be bad because I go through there and I would reclaim all the network cabling. If we pulled cable out of a location to recable or whatever else, I pulled, I'd store away that cable, I'd wrap it up, I'd mark it for the length and everything else. But if you'd find a bad cable length, you'd say, hey, you cut it up, then you burn it, and then you bury it. You want to get that bad cable out of the mix so that you don't encounter it later on. I did that with a security camera cable recently that I acquired a cable that I thought was brand new, had never been used for security cameras, 100 feet length, and I put it in behind baseboards. I went through and installed the cable, and after I got it installed, I figured out it's bad. And so I should have tested that before I put it in place. But I need to go through the same thing and I need to do inventories. Now, in the past, I've done those through even as something as simple, and this actually happens out there, that it was determined that a lot of people use Excel, the spreadsheet program from Microsoft. They use it as a row and column inventory system. They use it for a lot of things other than necessarily what a spreadsheet functionality would have with doing mathematical calculations and things like that. So, but I need to get on a better inventory system and go through, and I intend actually to clean up all my Mall 60s and go through and get them stored away again and have them marked for what they are, and go through. And that inventory also, as things wind down, do I need 5 Model 60s around that all work and have working components? I need to keep a supply of parts around, but having 5 spare planers that all seemingly work, having more than 5 MFM controllers and more than 5 ESDI controllers that go on those boards. In some ways, I'm getting into too much redundancy, that even there's a thought as we go through and do as my channel grows, there might even be a possibility, and getting into maybe the Patreon realm, or a little bit of a separation of certain segments of the channel. There could even be possible giveaways. And unfortunately, in an international world, I'll have to, you have to look at shipping a big, heavy system. But, that may be a thing that down the road, hey, you get me to 5,000 subscribers, I'm doing a giveaway of these systems, or this system at the time. And I need to start going through and actually reducing a little bit of inventory. Now that's happening a little bit with the channel. I'm having contacts of people going through and encountering bad things, a bad planer, a bad controller, that I can do a 1-for-1 swap out of. And I look at actually those bad controllers and the even the bad planers. I can go through and do things like we can do chip disassemblies. Interesting topic for delidding a chip, going through, especially some of those IBM ASIC chips. I mean, just have a whole bunch of insights to them that's kind of unknown, of going through and learning a little bit more about those chip structures internally, through having the, I don't want to go through, I don't want to ruin a good planer, but a bad planer. And those are still, if they're visually complete, they're still good for like museum displays and stuff like that. You have a working Mall 60 and you have the Mall 60 planer there, showing that, so there's areas that I need to go through and reduce on inventory. Yeah, and that's the thought, as I give away the system, and it's kind of like almost like the taxes. I would say, hey, you won it, but you've got to pay the amount to get it to you. And clearly there's going to be some places in the world that are, for the cost of shipping, it's going to be prohibitive to receiving something. And I was very glad, as an example of the these convertible PC convertible slices, that the person told me, hey, I just want a little bit of money for my time of putting together the shipment. And as long as you cover the shipping cost, we're good. And they realized that the market was saturated with Computer Reset um, having the liquidation and closing out of the building, that this was not as much of a commodity that they could sell. But I was just looking through for the purposes of having a shell like this. To me, is fantastic because it allows me to work with, and these are like brand spanking new. I mean, these are this is almost like a project box ultimately, for a circuit board that could be can be easily done single, a circuit board that is like that has these traces for a bus connector to be able to be dropped into a shell like this. And so I'm going to enjoy kind of working with some of that stuff. But I got to get pictures and trace out this little thing for Tom, because I saw that there's not a picture of that. The display adapter even has 2 boards in there. And I went through and I separated those and took pictures of them for Tom, and he got those up. That's brand new too. But yeah, chip deleting, I think, would be a very interesting thing, and I need to get set up like tube time and to go through and have the tools. I've got these USB microscopes and things like that, but I need to get something that I can capture better on video. And I want to do a platforms. I mean, I realized Eric for Tube Time, he goes through and he was doing he was using the Twitch platform pretty intensively, and that's just his medium. But Twitch, unfortunately, goes through and they don't have the resources like YouTube, that down so many months down the line, they go through and they'll delete. They go through and delete that stream, and that's Twitch is a very good format for a lot of people like gaming. That but that content doesn't go through and it doesn't last. It's not easily captured and where you can necessarily archive that content quite like YouTube. And it's funny, for the start of YouTube, they thought, how are they ever going to have capacity to store all these videos to where you can watch a UXW Bill video from 12 years ago on him going through and working with a Model 56 or Model 53 and seeing that content. And so YouTube's pretty good on preserving that video content. But I think, yeah, the ad lib, and there's I asked which slices because there's supposed to be that speech adapter slice for the PC convertible as well. Yeah, and see, I'm not monetized for anything on YouTube really. And I understand and we get into some inane things that I go through, and I have a leader for a Shinedown song that I try and play on ahead of my live stream, and YouTube can go through and say, hey, that's copyright content, even though Shinedown, I mean, that content is available on YouTube as it is. And so I go through and trim. I try and, in fact, I need to go through after the end of this. I'll go through and try and trim the leader off the front of it, and then that gets less complaints from YouTube. For all that. but that's what's coming up. I mean, there will even be a potential to keep people enthusiastic or to look forward to. There is a there is potential for giveaways happening down the road here as I go through and kind of consider of heading down to what I feel that I need on hand. Or I always looked at that I would have, and I've realized this in a lot of potential, where I always wanted to have at least one functional system or one functional version of each submodel of a system, and have enough of an adapter assortment and things like that that I could go through and I could replicate instances where somebody would notify me and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this particular adapter and getting it going. And me being able to replicate that ability to be able to mock up a system very quickly to go through and test and get results, or to look at, study a little bit more deeper. And I'm past that now. I've got, in some cases, an excess of systems that I are beyond my needs. And there may also be the potential. I'm trying to go through and work with Edgar Digital and Las Cruces, being the up and coming place that may be kind of the next computer reset sort of thing. That there might be even a possibility of me going through and doing consignment sales or something else, of me going through and having a system that I set up for someone that goes by there or works with them to buy a system to bring up, the aspects of them doing business, and able to get, to be able to purchase a PS2 or another system from them. So, yeah, this side character, and even, the PC Junior is blasted for not realizing its true potential, and the Tanny 1000 and things like that being a better PC Junior than the PC Junior was. I think the convertible is kind of neat too, in the fact that it has those slices for expansion, but the design in some cases is really just not the best. And it's an innovative concept to the PC convertible, and the design crept over to the PS2s and things like that. But the external appearance of the system, but the systems are kind of hit and miss. And that's why I say on the Model 53 SLC2 with the lower bays and everything else. And what I even brought up to Tom and Lewis is that the IBM already had this planar with the IDE, with the 46 SLC2 CPU in there. This nice fancy planar, they already had it in the 55 LS 46, but they went through and they retooled the case for the Model 53, and they ended up with lower bays, and we got to figure out what those lower bays are for and things like that. But it's just it took some time for IBM to take the concept of the 55SX and end up where they really needed to be with the Model 53 in the end of what the 55SX should have been closer to when it started out. And IBM lagged behind the times in release of a lot of its systems, and they didn't really think things through to where the market was going. They were innovative enough, but really, in the end, they had to stave off all the clone market just hit, and it decimated the big manufacturers as it was. Produced cheap systems that faded away. That that was all people needed to kind of traverse a few years on the computer, and then it was a throwaway society. They threw that old system in the trash and upgraded. Whereas these PS2s and name brand systems, Compaq and other manufacturers, that those were the systems that stuck around and still operate to this day out there, and that's a little bit of my affection for them. But I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna end the stream just to kind of wrap things up. I do appreciate all the attendance coming by and everything. But I've gone through the chat and kind of, I think I've addressed all the comments and things like that. I need to go through and set up the structure of the live stream a little bit more in advance than what I did last night. But that's fine too. I think I set up at 4 hours in ahead of time. I went through and I thought, well, it's a good topic. I've got a good picture and I can throw up, I can schedule it. And yeah, and I'm assuming when you say I want to go this summer, going to Edgar Digital and Las Cruces, and being aware that Las Cruces, and I'm a couple hours of drive away, it's New Mexico. I mean, it's going to be it's going to be hot weather for the summer, and then we're going to get into the monsoon season where it's going to be in a month's time. I'm expecting a lot more heavier rains and things like that that can go through. But just let me know, probably, ibmmuseum@gmail.com, if people are doing trips and going there to Edgar Digital, to let me know, and I can try and do meetups and things like that. And I can give, with a little bit of advance notice, I can give a little bit of indication on what I expect the weather to be. I'm not really as caught up with Las Cruces weather as I need to be, but I can just give a time frame of what seems to work, and that'll have to be adapted to whatever schedule I have in the future as well. But hard to tell. But I'll be happy to meet up with people and be a little bit of a tour guide. I need to get down there and do a little bit more video from the location and cover the items that are down there. And a lot like Computer Reset, I think there could be a little bit of the online sales. Roger does have a online, for the eBay stuff, and they've got a web page, a way to go through for people to contact them and to check up a little bit more on the items they have, and can do sales that way. But so I intend to be down there a lot more too. So I'm just watch for the videos that will come up this week. I'll try and have at least a few that I can put out, and then the live stream coming up this next weekend. It's going to be maybe within a few weekends here that I'll get down to Edgar Digital and do another live stream down there as well. So I thank everybody for stopping by and watching. I appreciate all the chat comments of people interacting here. Hopefully I've answered all the questions and stuff like that have come up. And I look forward to seeing people in the next live stream. And so, as I always say, this is IBM Museum. That's all I have for now. Thank you.